you know, we can do the whole thing without slides, but
we can
it's
see
nicer
them
this way.
Wow, I'm so glad that you know this platform better than I do.
I just had to spotlight him.
Okay, good. So everyone, thank you so much for being here, for those of you who are here live, and also we hope those of you who are here later enjoy it as well. We are chatting with David McConaghay, who is our dear friend. He's also an Ayurvedic doctor and Vedic astrologer. He is defining a holistic healing modality called multidimensional medicine, and he is also becoming a doctor of what is theology?
Divinity.
Divinity.
Yeah.
I forgot this time. But also a dear friend, and we have been so enjoying these conversations that are weaving Vedic astrology in with what we are all experiencing during this time of Corona, and all the questions that we have, like, has anything like this ever happened before, and where are we going next, and what can we be paying the most attention to so that we can sort of like source and get the most out of the experience and align ourselves with the energies of the cosmos so that we can benefit and not and suffer the least during this transition. So I'm Sierra, and Molly is also here, the co-founder of Cultivate Balance, and she and I are basically co-hosting David, and we are going to set this up as sort of a discussion, and questions can come up as we go. So David's going to be doing the talk or the presentation. He's got these awesome slides and he has lots to say, but everyone feel free to jump in if you have a question or something that you can relate to. We want it to still be very much a discussion model.
Yeah, don't be shy to unmute, and don't be shy to type your questions in. And we want this to be something that you feel like you can really participate in. Also, we want to be answering your questions as well.
Yes.
We're so glad that you're here, David. Thank you.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, thank you for hosting and for making this happen. This is my favorite thing, to talk with people and share some of this information, and would totally reiterate the conversational tone that we want to cultivate. There's lots to say, and mostly what is important is what's relevant to you and how it actually is landing in your own life. And so that's what we're interested in. So here's this first slide, this really catchy title that I came up with. Really attention grabbing there, that apocalyptic astrology. So that's a strategic thing, but also let's just define our terms very carefully. If we do the etymology, apocalypse really just refers to the uncovering, the revealing, the unveiling. And if we look around, there's a lot of that happening these days, right? One of the main things that I've noticed in this Corona moment is the extent to which the ways that we are living on this planet that are not working for most of the living beings on the planet are being exposed. And the ways that we are not caring for ourselves, for each other, for the least of us in society, our essential workers, mostly minimum wage legal immigrants, just as a broad stroke, right? And so all that's being revealed, like, unavoidably. You can't miss that right now. And so it's this ongoing process. And even all the conspiracy theories are an interesting thing, where even though, like, we don't want to get carried away in too much of the nonsense, like, there is this sense of, like, the official story is not the only story, and there's something behind the veil, and don't pay any attention to the man behind the curtain, right? So that there's this greater unveiling that's happening in the world, and so that's really besides the attention grabbing quality of the word apocalypse, that's what we're talking about. And then astrology. So this is specifically Vedic astrology. using the sidereal zodiac. And the word for Vedic astrology in Sanskrit is Jyotish, which signifies what we're talking about when we're talking about Jyotish is the study of how light changes as it, okay, the study of how time changes light as it moves through space is our most like succinct definition of Jyotish. So if we tune to the most recent quantum physics, we can basically understand that we are these condensed balls of light that are moving and changing as time spirals through space, right? So time is basically marked by spin, right? One day is one rotation of the Earth. 1 year is the Earth rotating around the sun. Biological time is kept through our heartbeat mostly. And did you know that blood spirals through veins and arteries in a vortex? So even blood is spinning, and individual red blood cells are spinning on their axis. So this is how time passes, is through spin. And so time spirals through space, and as that happens, light changes. The appearances of light change. And so as the days go by, as our bodies change, different forms of light in the form of other people, animals, plants, the mineral realm, the whole spectrum of life experience in the form of light transforming before us moves through time. And so this is what we're looking at. This is what we're studying when we're studying astrology, is how time transforms light as it moves through space. Okay? Does that make sense? Did I lose you? Hey everybody, there's a bunch more people here now.
Didn't know that. Didn't know any of that.
Okay, so we're off and running. And again, for the people who just joined, most welcome to pop in with questions. And this is a very conversational vibe that we're trying to cultivate here. So I will just run my mouth the whole time, and so just nudge me, and we'll talk about something that is relevant to your particular circumstances. Here is our brief little orientation to the planets. Basically, we've got the sun and the moon as the archetypal father and mother, masculine, feminine, king and queen. The mom and the dad had a little baby, and that baby is Earth, right? And so that triad is, we all know that 3 is the magic number. And so between sun, moon, and Earth, we really have life and existence, and it's between those things that we have life that's created. So there's like, those are really like abstract principles in a lot of ways. And then we've got Mercury, who is the Greek god Hermes, right? Hermes, who stole the fire from the gods and brought it down to Earth for humans to use. And so Mercury goes everywhere. Mercury translates between realms. He's really the universal communicator, collecting information, sharing information, spreading it all around. In some ways, am I going to say that? Yeah. The knowledge of good and evil, in the Garden of Eden, right? Like there's a parallel between that story and Hermes stealing the fire from the gods, right? It's knowledge that humans like aren't supposed to have, but that's in Old Testament, like angry, jealous God sort of stuff, right? And as we move into this next phase of human evolution, we need to wield that wisdom appropriately and skillfully and take full responsibility for it. And so that's the lesson that Saturn's trying to teach us right now, which we're going to talk about. Okay, so we've got sun, moon, Earth that have created life. We've got Mercury, who's sort of like the secretary communicating between all the different levels. Then we got Mars and Venus. Yeah.
Sorry, real quick. Will you reshare your screen? I feel like I clicked something and it made it go away, but I don't know if it just went away for me or what.
It was there for me, so I think that was probably just...
Okay. I thought I stole it from everyone. Okay.
Also, just while we're taking a pause, David, if throughout this discussion, if you could like continue to touch on the differences, or maybe just a quick thing now, the differences between Vedic and Western astrology? I think we have some people joining us who maybe don't know sort of where those things diverge or how they align.
Absolutely. That's a really good point. So for this part, generally between the two systems, the planets are the planets, the signs are the signs. There's slightly different mythologies, like, Vedic obviously comes from the Hindu pantheon and has that whole sequence of mythology and story associated with it. And the Western system comes, it's Greek, Roman, and Babylonian is that realm of mythology. But it's amazing to do the comparative study, because it's basically the hero's journey over and over again in different formats and different names for the same character. And so generally the planets are the planets, the signs are the signs. The one thing that is unique is that the Western system uses Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, whereas the Vedic system stops at Saturn. And so Saturn is the furthest planet that you can see with the naked eye. And given the sort of vast cosmic scope of what the rishis who wrote this system down for us, given their vast scope of knowledge, I refuse to believe that they didn't know about Pluto, right? But it's a choice to stop at Saturn, because again, when we're dealing with the study of light, what is the light that's actually influencing us here on the planet? It's Saturn. That's the light that can reach us, and so that's the limit of the solar system as is relevant to the astrological influence on the planet Earth. If we were going to do astrology from Jupiter, it may be different, right? If we were living on Jupiter and we did astrology relative to that point in space, then it would be different. But here we are on Earth, and that's what we've got.
That's very helpful.
Does that make sense? Yeah, totally. So Mars and Venus are very much like the worldly, it's the worldly realm. It's tamas and rajas for the Ayurvedic literati among us. So it's the warrior and the lover. Basically, like, we're born and the warrior needs to protect us and keep us alive. It's our survival instinct. It's that part of us that is like, when it comes down to it, like, I will fight to the death. Like I like, even single-celled organisms, if you poke it with a pin, it'll like squirm away, right? So that's that Mars quality, where it's like, all living beings have this impulse to survive first and foremost. And so that's the warrior within us. And then there's Venus, who wants to connect and the lover and wants to experience pleasure. And we're also born with these 5 senses, and we typically want to avoid pain and experience pleasure. That's the primary basic motivation of human life. And so really Mars gives us the strength to withstand pain, and Venus gives us the desire for pleasure. And so, like, Venus, the intelligent form of Venus, is like the refinement of pleasure, and figure out what is actually pleasurable, right? There's a lot of things where it's like, oh yeah, like, I don't know, I don't want to be gruff about it, but like, there's we all know that there are base pleasures that are temporarily satisfying and pleasurable, but then you have a hangover, for example. Whereas as we refine that quality of Venus, we get in touch with like, oh, like, I could eat 3 bags of chocolate tonight, or I could drink some triphala and wake up early and meditate. Like, those aren't necessarily mutually exclusive, but one is a much different form of pleasure than the other, right? So so basically Mars and Venus are that pair on the earthly plane that sort of most sort of mundane lives consist of survival and pleasure. Okay, I'm alive again, I can eat, I'm safe, a bear is not going to attack me, cool. Now where can I get food and sex? It's basically like how humans work on so many levels, right? That can be a discussion topic if somebody else has anything to say about that. Maybe that's just me. Maybe that's just I'm the only one that operates like that.
No,
I don't
definitely not
think
just
so.
you.
Okay, good. So then we come to Jupiter and Saturn, these gas giants, and they really are the giants of the solar system. They are the largest planets. Jupiter especially is by far the largest planet in the solar system, and these two planets are going to be our main topic of conversation. So we'll speak more about them right now. And then Rahu and Ketu are the north and south node of the moon, and they're also very much implicated in this whole kerfuffle that the world is in, and so we're going to talk more about them as well. But just to say that they are the shadow planets. When there's an eclipse and the shadow crosses the moon or crosses the sun, you're seeing Rahu or Ketu. So they don't have a physical reality, but they are this shadowy electromagnetic nodal point out in space that are considered the karmic axis. Rahu is that leading edge that's like, ooh, like new experience. Like typically Rahu shows why we incarnated in this life. It's like what experiences did we not get enough of that we want to learn more about in this lifetime? We just need it. Oh, as soon as I get it, I need more. And then Ketu is that more like past karma, like where are we coming from? The tail of that dragon, where it's like the secret power, hidden talent, hidden skills. Ketu is why Mozart could write symphonies as a 9-year-old, right? It's like he didn't learn that in this lifetime. He didn't, as a 9-year-old, he didn't like, that wasn't Rahu, like, oh, I'm going to gain all this new experience and figure out how to do this. No, like he came in with that, and that's that Ketu quality. Okay, is that clear enough? That's sort of like summary of the planetary entities. Cool. It's so fun to see the whole team here, and so many other people.
I love that
Hey,
chart,
everybody.
David. That was really nice.
This one, I just made this up. I really, yeah, you know, seems right.
Great, gorgeous.
Okay. So this is sort of our bullet points of what we're going to talk about in this presentation. Jupiter in Capricorn is in many ways like the initiating incident for this COVID thing. There are other qualities as well. It's always multifactorial, of course, but Jupiter in Capricorn is our main concern now and for the next year and a half, really. And it's with Jupiter in Capricorn that we're tracking when the quarantine is going to be most intense, and that, yeah, so we'll get into that right now. Jupiter and Saturn together, these are this 20-year cycle that goes throughout time and is a really interesting indicator of where we're at right now. We'll talk about Rahu and Ketu and their changing signs this year and some of the historical moments that they show us that correlate to where we are right now. And then we got a couple eclipses coming up this year. The bullet point that is not on this page has to do with retrograde cycles. This coming week, starting tomorrow, Saturn goes retrograde. And then I think it's, let's see, tomorrow is Sunday. Then it's Tuesday that Venus goes retrograde. And then it is, I think, Thursday or Friday that Jupiter goes retrograde. And so within the span of 4 or 5 days, these Saturn and Jupiter stop and turn around in the sky, and Venus does the same thing. It's very rare. Like planets are going retrograde all the time, but for 3 planets, all right, basically at the same time, to, you know, so a planet is going along from our perspective, and it's going along, and to go retrograde, it has to slow down, stop, and then slowly back up, and it starts accelerating the other direction. The best metaphor I have for it is like if you've ever driven a boat and you're going forward and you can't just throw it in reverse. You have to cut the ignition and slow down, and then you can put it in reverse, and then you can back it up. That it's sort of like that sort of energy, right? And so all 3 of these planets are basically at a standstill in the sky right now, which is sort of my understanding of it is that for the next several months, all of the sort of progress that has happened in terms of this virus and the quarantine and all the social changes that have happened, have all been while these planets are direct. And now that they're stopping and turning around, there's going to be a little bit of, there's going to be encouragement to go back to normal. It's going to be like, whoa, that was crazy. That never happened. Let's back this up and let's really reflect on what we really want out of this, right? And it's like, and so in that way, there's a reprieve where we get to, you know, the quarantine restrictions are going to loosen up, right? Things are going to open back up, and it will loosen, and there is this sort of this is reversal of all this crazy stuff that's been happening. It's like, okay, back it up. Jupiter's going to go back into Sagittarius. It's fine. And when planets go retrograde, it represents an internalization of that energy. It's time for reflection. It's not going back to normal, but it is this pause of the normal flow of progress to be like, wait a minute, what have I been doing, and what have been the outcomes of those actions? And let's analyze that a little bit. And is that what I want? Are that actions producing the reactions that I desire? Or what is happening here? So it's that reflective period, which is interesting in this case, because in a lot of ways, the whole quarantine has had a very like retrograde feel to it, right? Where it's like, okay, everybody just stop. And, you know, basically Saturn went into Capricorn and put the whole world in a timeout, right? So, okay, everybody stop, go to your room and think about what you've done.
And reach out to your ex.
I also think it's interesting. Oh, go ahead, Sierra.
Nothing. I said just stop and reach out to your ex. Just kidding.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's Venus going retrograde, right? That's that. Venus in Taurus going retrograde is sentimental and reaching out to your ex. So that's happening.
That's happening.
That's the thing.
I also think it's interesting that like we're gonna get this reprieval like soon that is actually a retrograde, but it feels like going back to normal. You know, like people are framing it to themselves as like, oh, we're just going back to how things were, but actually what we're going to is a retrograde away from this new normal, not back to the old normal. It's just a retrograde. I'm like, whoa. Yeah, and there's a little bit of a push-pull to that, isn't there? Where it's like, in some ways, you know, the standard advice for a retrograde cycle is to like contemplate, like stay home, like it's not a time to go like initiate new things and start big projects. It's like, okay, let's reflect on how our projects are going and make adjustments and do that sort of internal process. And so in a lot of ways, I think it's all the more appropriate. It's especially difficult, having been quarantined for however many months now, to stick with it. But really, this is the opportunity to get the juice out of that experience, because that quarantine has thrown us all for a loop, and things are different now, and we are different now. And so to then have some time to reflect on that, be like, whoa, like what the fuck just happened, right? And what do I think about it? And who did I reach out to in that time? And how did that go? And am I okay with solitude? And if not, why? And what are my greatest fears? And this sort of reflective period about like what just happened and why, and how did I deal with it? And how would I want to deal with it in the future when it comes back again this fall? When everything turns direct again and it gets more intense this second time around. So that's our sort of retrograde conversation. And Sierra, you're totally right. Venus turning retrograde. So the other thing that is different about Western Vedic astrology is there's a difference of about 24 degrees in where we consider the planets to be. So if you follow Western astrology, Venus is very much in Gemini, and you know, these planets are all 24 degrees pushed forward. And so that's using the tropical zodiac. That's more aligned to seasonal points in the sky. So there's Aries season and Taurus season, whereas the sidereal zodiac moves with the stars, so that it's like, oh, cool, like
there's Venus. And when you look in the sky, the stars, the constellation behind Venus is Taurus. And so neither one is actually right or wrong, just measuring something slightly different is how we look at that. The Western astrology, that tropical zodiac is more earth-based, more like earth. It's more concerned with sort of like that triangle between the sun, earth, and moon, and that the seasonal cycles. So yeah, there are these fixed points in the sky, and just over time the stars drift, but those fixed points in the sky relative to our place on Earth stay the same. So that's the difference in that way. So if you hear me say a planet in a sign that is not where you think it is, it's that difference between Western Vedic, that 24 degrees. Yeah, so this is Jupiter in Capricorn, and Jupiter is our good-looking sage guy there, trying to compose beautiful wisdom and expansive knowledge, and to liberate all the people from their suffering, and bestow grace upon humanity, and teach spiritual truths. And Capricorn is this crocodile who's like about to curl up around him and scarf him up. And so Capricorn is ruled by the planet Saturn. And this is this first indicator of this contentious energy between these two planets, where Jupiter wants to expand everything it touches, and Saturn wants to compress everything it touches. And so there's this push and pull. And in this case, Jupiter is in Saturn's house, right? And so Jupiter can be as expansive as he can, will sort of abide by the rules of the home where he is. And Capricorn is very risk averse, fear-based, practical, very pragmatic, really just wants to do simple things that have predictable results. Very much the business person of the zodiac, the merchant who is keeping his budget and doing all the budget planning, and there's a contingency plan. If we don't make our numbers this quarter, we'll cut this expense. So it's just like everything wants to go to plan in Capricorn, and it's a very restrictive energy, it's risk averse, would rather it is so appropriate that this quarantine has been happening happening within the sign of Capricorn, basically. So let's look at this timeline. 23rd of January, Saturn enters its own sign in Capricorn. That is, from the United States perspective, when this COVID thing really kicked off. That's when Nancy Pelosi got her briefing from the World Health Organization. I think on like the 24th of January, Trump tweeted praising China's response, which is just, anyway, we don't have to say anything more about that, really. And so that really is when it started to become a thing in the United States. And until then, it was sort of a problem the rest of the world had to deal with. But all of a sudden, it's starting to become a real thing, and the talk of quarantine and stay at home instructions start to come in, and it's really when then Jupiter joins the party in Capricorn, 29th of March. It was that week when Jupiter was on the cusp, right? Maybe it was the week before when the hard stay-at-home order came through, right? It was like the 18th or 19th of March or something, when it was like, oh, international travel shut down, stay at home, really strict essential errands only, is when that kicked in. And so we got Jupiter and Saturn in Capricorn, and it's putting that focus on this restrictive, risk-averse, when in doubt, stay at home. It's safer to stay at home. I would rather stay home and be safe than try to climb the mountain over there, because when I see the mountain, sure, it looks nice over there, but all I can see are the river and the forest and the wild animals and the deadly viruses between here and there. And so let's, when in doubt, stay home, stick to the plan. And so that's this Capricorn energy that is pervading this whole thing. So yeah. So tomorrow is the 10th of May. So you can see, just a point of orientation, the brackets on the Saturn timeline are where the whole Jupiter timeline takes place, right? And please forgive the crudity of this model. I didn't have time to build it to scale. So the distances between the dots are not necessarily like to scale of the distance in time, but we do our best. So tomorrow Saturn turns retrograde. Later this week Jupiter turns retrograde. So we got these points, and then in September they're both going to turn direct again. So they're tracking together pretty closely for most of this year. End of June, this 29th of June date is significant because that's when Jupiter will go back into Sagittarius, which is a sign that it rules, way more comfortable there. And while Jupiter's back in Sagittarius, that's when things are likely to really go back to normal. That's when, like, you know, I'm still on this Scottish island and I'm making travel plans for July, because that's when things are going to open back up. It's going to be, you know, it's going to be fine for that period of time. Basically, you know, there will be other disruptions, looking at the eclipses and some of the other things, but mostly as the primary indicator of the quarantine itself and the social crisis that it represents, Jupiter in Capricorn is that main indicator for us. And so when Jupiter's not in Capricorn, we're not worried about it. And so from 29th of June to 19th of November, again, there will be things to pay attention to, but I'm pretty confident you'll be able to move around in that time. Come 19 November, and, you know, that's right after the election. That's right before an eclipse. That's right before this starred point on the timeline, which is December 21st, 2020. And that is when Jupiter and Saturn have their exact conjunction. And so maybe we'll come back to this chart in a minute, but let's look at that starred point on this chart. This is our big my headphones are telling me they're tired. Such tired headphones. Okay. Hopefully the speaker will be okay here. Can you still hear me?
Great. Yes.
So we're looking at this timeline of Jupiter and Saturn conjunctions. And so, yeah, we've set up this sort of opposition. Jupiter and Saturn really they both want us to evolve and grow spiritually. They have very different approaches to helping us do that. Jupiter expands things, Saturn contracts and puts pressure. Jupiter gives inspiration and big ideas, and yeah, Saturn says, you only have this much money, this much time, these limits. You have to learn how to live within your limits. The biggest limitation being our lifespan, right? Jupiter brings grace, and really think of like the grace of forgiveness, right? You don't have to suffer, right? What does Mary Oliver say? You don't have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert, right? Like, there is the grace of forgiveness, and that's Jupiter. And that's wisdom. That's that spiritual bounty, and so graceful and so nice. And there's value to taking responsibility for your actions. And Saturn needs you to be responsible. And the best way to fix a mistake is not to make it in the first place. So you should learn from your experience, learn from your lessons, and you did this, and so you have to clean it up. And so, you know, these very different approaches to dealing with karma, really. So yeah, when these two are in conjunction, there's sort of this passionate conversation, not to say battle, going on between them about which way is going to win. And they tend to mark, these 20-year cycles mark pretty transformative moments in time and space. And so one of the patterns that came through in looking at the history, and you can see that this chart runs from 1842 to 2238. So we got like a 400-year span. And so, okay, let's look at this. So this is Johannes Kepler drawing a map of where these conjunctions happen every 20 years. And what he found is that they happen about 120 degrees from each other, which means they create this triangular shape. So if one happens in Aries, 120 degrees from Aries is Leo, and 120 degrees from Leo is Sagittarius, and 120 degrees from Sagittarius is back to Aries, right? 3 times 120 is 360 degrees in a circle. And so they create this triangular shape, and those are the 3 fire signs, right? So as these conjunctions are happening, every 20 years, Saturn and Jupiter are getting together in a fire sign. And then because precession of the equinoxes, and because it's not a perfect 120 degrees, there's this drift, right? And so you can see that these triangles are drifting a little bit already. So it's moving through the signs. Excuse me. And in that lower right-hand corner, you can see that, okay, a couple of those, 2 of them were in Aries, but then the next 2 are in Pisces. So it's gone from a fire sign to a water sign, or it's actually moving in the opposite direction. So Pisces into Aries. So we can see that pattern in this more linear chart here, where, okay, 1842, Sagittarius is a fire sign. 61, Leo is a fire sign. 81, Aries, fire sign. 1901, back to Sagittarius, fire sign, right? So it's going through these different fire signs every 20 years, this conjunction happening in a fire sign. And it really defines the epoch of this period of time. Like, what are the dominant energies that the spiritual teachers are what is the mechanism for us to learn our spiritual lessons? It's through fire. And if you look at what's happening in history during that time, like from 1842 on, like we're starting to get into the Industrial Revolution, right? From 1842 to 1901, for example, and even like up to 1940, where we start to, the next one starts to be a lot of Earth. Like that is the beginning of mechanization, internal combustion engines, cars, airplanes, and the speed with that mechanization, the speed of life increasing exponentially, right? We can fly places, we can drive places. What was a 3-day journey on horse is now a 2-hour drive. And so that's fire element, right? And that's incredible transformation. With that comes incredible transformation of the planet, right? When you have a tractor as opposed to a team of horses, you can do a lot more earth moving than you can with just the horses. So it leads to this incredible acceleration of the pace of transformation, which is what the fire element does, right? Fire is the intermediary between spirit and humans and the animal realm. Like fire is that transformative force that moves between realms and changes the qualities of one realm into that of another, right? We have this not me stuff that I call food, and I put it in my body, and the heat of my digestive fire turns it into the me stuff that is my body, right? That's a transformation between realms. That's fire element. And so then here, in September of 1921, we have this anomaly where the pattern is broken, and Jupiter and Saturn come together at 2 degrees of Virgo. And so Virgo is the first sign after Leo, right? And so it's just barely crept into Virgo. the first 2 degrees of the sign, so just 2 or 3 degrees in the other direction, and it's still in Leo. But nope, the drift has happened, and that marks the initiation of the Earth epoch. But fire still has its sort of last gasp, of course, and we can see that the shift in these epochs is typically marked by these triplets, where because of retrograde cycles, these conjunctions sometimes happen 3 times in quick succession. So we see August 1940, October 1940, February 41. That's this like really close conjunction where there are all these crossings in the sign of Aries, the fire sign. And then and then there's Capricorn, which of course comes after Sagittarius. So we moved from Leo into Virgo, Sagittarius into Capricorn, and then there's this next Earth triplet to mark the initiation of this Earth epoch in the early 80s, 80, 81, 81. And that's in Virgo. And then in May of the year 2000, we have the last of the fire for several hundred years. I didn't look that far into the future, but it's like 240 years into the future that there is the next fire conjunction. And so that was the last, that was 20 years ago in May of 2000, that marked the end of the full proper end of that fire epoch. And so on December 21st of this year, we're sort of fully into the Earth epoch. And you can see that, the Earth epoch gets interrupted by air, and air will be the next element to come through. Fire, earth, air, water is the sequence in the Vedic astrology system. But really, we're in this Earth epoch until 2179, right? So really, we're looking when we first got a first glimpse of it in 1921, and it sort of comes to its full stop in 2179. So cool, 160 years or so, right? 260. Long time. So that's to me absolutely fascinating, and Marx helps. That's like the most zoomed out perspective on this situation that I've found in an astrological cycle so far. Of like, okay, what is this shift that we're in? Because I've been sensing for a long time that there is this massive shift happening on a civilizational, planetary level, but how do we understand what it is? And for me, it makes a lot of sense that it's the move from fire to earth. And it's within a fiery paradigm that we would feel super comfortable getting in a plane and burning a bunch of fossil fuels and flying around just to go to a meeting, right? Like, got to fly New York to San Francisco to go to a meeting so I can make some money and get a promotion and accomplish my ambition and be powerful and be seen as a bright light in the world, and all that, right? And so burning all these fossil fuels, and literally like we have, the sanitized term is climate change, but we have global warming, right? The temperatures are going, it's getting hotter right now, and so it's literally this fiery epoch, and so to transform that into, or to shift into some earth time, is nice. And so we can see the overlap, right? We can trace the sort of initiation of the environmental movement, and like all these things it's not like it was purely fire, right? There's these, starting 1921, coming in through the 60s and the 80s. Like one of the things I meant to look up was when was Silent Spring published, right? I'm pretty sure that was in that like early 80s zone, where all of a sudden like Earth, boom, like Virgo, let's get practical, let's notice the patterns about what's happening on the planet. And so Sierra and I talked about this a little bit on Instagram just now, but the difference between fire and earth. Earth is more specific. Earth has to do with particular embodiments, particular places. You know, this forest is different than that forest. And the fiery mindset says, cool, that's all firewood. That's all timber that can be clear cut for profit and advancement, right? Whereas the earth element looks at it more like, no, like this is this particular woods. This is the forest I grew up in. I have a relationship with this tree. You can't cut down this tree for timber and then plant a new one and tell me it's the same because you offset the carbon. That's not how this works.
And there's
and so yeah, Molly, I see you
there's also a component
moving towards a question, maybe.
Pride, right? A component of like fire and pride and moving away from pride. Like I think of people who traveled on all those planes, like who just traveling for one business meeting. I feel like I know so many people who would say like, oh yeah, I flew 100 flights last year, as a point of pride, and sort of how that pride and that like sharpness of fire and pride has impacted us. I think it's so interesting, and I'm wondering sort of if we can think of pride as a theme from fire. Correct me if I'm wrong. Like what other like general earth would we be moving into then as we move away from
almost like qualities of Pitta, and now we're moving into qualities of Kapha, and all that embodies in terms of like personality traits and movement and whatever.
Yeah. And so I mean it's a precise sort of counterbalancing, right? Where the earth is quite humble, right? So much power, but slow and humble for the most part. Doesn't, you can dig a hole in it and it just sits there. Very patient.
We also think like can we map on the qualities of Kapha, like, compassionate? Is that like a thing that we would start to see more of? Loving.
Patient.
Yeah.
Patient. Like the long game, getting into the long game rather than the instant gratification.
More concerned about relationship than ambition.
Yeah.
Right? Again, it's less about look what I can do, and it's like, how are we?
Yeah.
That's which again we can see happening with this COVID thing.
Yeah.
And then it also like practical things like plant medicine, gardens. Where does your food come from? Like Kapha is always very concerned with where their next meal is going to come from, and that's where we get our like comfort.
Come on.
from. But that's a real concern at this point in history, is in terms of what's coming up. We sort of gotten off easy so far in terms of this pandemic, that our sort of the systems of our civilization are still somewhat upstanding, right? You can still order stuff on Amazon. The grocery store isn't quite as full, but there's basically stuff there, and
trash is still,
and so
right?
And so the invitation as we move deeper into this Earth epoch is to be more in touch with the particular place where you are. What food grows here? What plants grow here? What animals live here where I am? There's no more oil and gas that makes it more efficient in some crazy way to have food grown in China and put in a tanker and shipped across the Pacific Ocean to be stocked in our, and then driven in a truck to be put on a shelf that we then drive to go pick it up. Like, when oil is cheap and abundant, that makes a certain amount of sense, right? That allows for profit, and that allows for people to get rich and fulfill their ambitions. But in an earth-based epoch, no, things are way slower than that. Things are much more place-based.
Wow, that's awesome. so helpful, David. I love it. It's just like really clicking into my mind. So thank you so much.
Cool. I'm glad.
Does anyone have any questions or any thoughts that are coming up, like into the chat or unmute and share? I mean, David's on it, so we can just keep going, but know that you listening are included in this process as well. Thanks, David.
Wow.
Yeah, totally.
Oh, Pepper says, I've got to tune into another event. Just wanted to say thank you so much for sharing.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks for being here. Yeah. Nice to see
Pepper.
you. Okay. So, anyone chime in at any time, and we'll just keep sort of rolling along here. Do we have a time limit? Do we have a hard end?
No, we're all just riveted. We're just all listening in awe. Sebastian says, what might moving into Earth sign mean for international travel and communications?
Ooh.
Well, let's look at that. There's a specific.
We're recording. If you have to leave early, we're recording.
Yeah.
Sorry. Go ahead, David.
Okay. So we're going to look at the communications question. Brings up this eclipse happening June 21st of 2020, 6:40 a.m. It's mostly happening over like Africa and South Asia, and just to be clear, like don't be confused. The eclipse path that's shown below is the lunar eclipse on July 4th. So I just we have the solar eclipse, the chart for the solar eclipse, and then eclipses always come in pairs, right? So there's a solar eclipse and a lunar eclipse, and so it's really interesting. In this case, we have summer solstice eclipse and then July 4th eclipse. So there's some action happening, and then we also have this. We then have this conjunction happening on December 21st. So summer and winter solstice, like the alignments with the sort of planet it's like, I don't know what it means, but
happening on a solstice is,
it's intense. And so this other solar eclipse is happening the week before the solstice. So that week in December, I bought a ticket to the Patagonia Eclipse Festival down in Chile, or I think it's in Chile, for this solar eclipse. And I'm either gonna go like in November and just stay down there for several months, or I'm not going at all, because I'm not gonna travel in this December period, because it's just hectic. It's not looking good.
God, tell us everything.
And not I don't know about good, but it's not. There's going to be disruptions. Sebastian, we're talking about between December 14th and 21st, and really a week on either side of that solar eclipse. So December 14th, in that range. But really, I wanted to answer your first question about communications, because it's this solar eclipse over the summer that's happening in Gemini. Mercury is right there, and will be retrograde, right? So everybody freaks out about Mercury retrograde, but here we have a retrograde Mercury with an eclipse happening on top of it in its own sign of Gemini, and this will be the last eclipse in that Gemini Sagittarius axis. It's the nodes have been there since March of 2019, and so this marks the transition from Gemini Sagittarius to Taurus Scorpio. You can see in the December eclipse, Rahu is there in Taurus, Ketu down there in Scorpio. So that's another shift from fire and air into earth and water for the nodes, right? So Gemini is an air sign, Sagittarius a fire sign, and for the last year and a half, well, for the last year and for another 6 months or so to come, we're in this fire and air axis. And there's going to be this eclipse on June 21st that, you know, I'm not big on predictions, but, you know, that time, like, don't be surprised if the internet goes down for a couple days around that eclipse. That's the sort of thing, you know, the post office is in dire straits right now. I was about to say, like, make sure you have stamps and you know your friends' addresses, but like, who knows? Like, you know, we're going to need some really big cups and some really long string is the sort of thing. And so, Seva, to address the gist of your question as I hear it, I think I don't know what Earth-based communications look like. You know, because our international telecommunications qualities, that laser quickness, the satellites and everything, that's all happened in this very fiery realm. And so, you know, it strikes me as like, I don't think we're really going to lose our technology. We're not going to go back to the Stone Age. Nothing like that is going to happen. It's not actually apocalyptic in that way. But my sense of it is that we'll be encouraged to increase our capacity to communicate with the forces of Mother Earth. So we will need to understand weather patterns for more than just whether we should go golfing tomorrow, right? It's about, you know, how do we communicate with our garden? How do we communicate with the beings with whom we share the planet? How are we in touch with the aspects of ourselves that are buried underground within our psyche, right? It is this more earth-based way of communicating with ourselves and the world around us. And so, you know, there's a lot of indigenous nature-based traditions where that knowledge has been preserved, thankfully, although it's in constant threat these days. You know, there's also, like, for me, it brings up, and specifically the Scorpio alignment with the nodes brings up, you know, like, what are the earth-based wisdom traditions? You know, things like what am I thinking of? Sweat lodges and tarot readings, this sort of like occult earth magic with a K at the end, right? The Wiccan realm of magic, right? The plant medicines and that sort of all that witchy sort of stuff, which is very like the earth-based medicine. It's calling in our capacity to communicate with those realms. So that's how I would respond to that question. So let's look at Rahu and Ketu. This chart, this one has the potential to be a little bit scary. I'll just say that. And so the purpose of this is just to be aware and to know what period of time that we're living in, so that we can be prepared for the level of transformation that is likely and is happening, right? It's already happening. Like, there's no need to be scared because you can see that it's already happening and you're here, and so it's fine. But there's also the strong invitation to be ready and don't go back to normal, don't go back to sleep, keep paying attention, and know that this transformation is happening and coming. So let's look at this. So right now, Rahu and Ketu are in the Gemini-Sagittarius axis from March 19 to September 2020, down in that lower left-hand corner, right? Cool, that's where we are. Oh, that's the dinner bell, don't care. Okay, so let's look. The last time Rahu and Ketu were in Gemini and Sagittarius, July 2000 to February 2002. Any major events happen in the world in that time period? There are three things that come to mind. One is really like, that's fresh off of the Y2K crisis, where this was sort of the last time we thought the world was going to end and planes were going to fall from the sky, right? And so there's that, and that also, that time period also corresponds to the last, May 2000, right? This last Jupiter Saturn conjunction, which happened in Aries. So, and at 28 degrees Aries, so like really close to, never mind, take that back, scratch that. So anyway, May 2000, there was Jupiter Saturn conjunction, and July 2000, Gemini and Sagittarius go into this, Rahu and Ketu go into this Gemini Sagittarius axis, which is the most transformative axis in the zodiac. It's when we're looking towards, did I say this? When we're looking towards Sagittarius, we're looking towards the center of the galaxy. When we're looking towards Gemini, we're looking out into deep space. So we're looking, it is the galactic plane. So it's where all the action is happening. It's where all the churn of our solar system is happening. And so it is this transformative place. Okay, so Y2K crisis. We've got the dot-com bubble crashing the economy, right? All this speculative investment and all the excitement around what is the internet and how much money can we make off of it, right? And then all these venture capitalists put a bunch of money and people did nothing but buy fancy office chairs with it, is what I remember happening. And then the whole thing crashed because there's a bunch of nonsense. And then, of course, the events of September 11th, which, if you think about the last time our whole society was transformed in an instant, the way that it has been with COVID is 9/11, right? There's a pretty direct parallel, and it's this Rahu in Gemini, Ketu in Sagittarius, and especially as it gets into the later parts of it, right? February 2002 is when it changed, and so September of 2001 to February 2002, okay, last couple months of that 18-month cycle, cool, like we're getting into the last couple months of this round of the cycle, right? So that's what's happening. It's that level of transformation that's happening. If we go back, I didn't really find a good correlate for the early 80s. There's something, there's like the start of the savings and loan scandal. There's Cold War stuff happening, but I didn't find this really like clear event in the 80s. So maybe that's a invitation for further inquiry. So maybe somebody wants to do the historical research, or maybe I'll find it someday. But the one before that, again, is really, really obvious. Between May of 63 and December 64. Anybody?
Kennedy.
We had this handsome, noble president who wanted to make America like Camelot. And then one day he was with us and the next day he wasn't. And then after that, Lyndon Johnson started escalating the Vietnam War. Within that same time period was the Gulf of Tonkin incident, which was the 9/11 of that time period, right? Tonkin has been proven to be a false flag event. Apparently the debate is still out about 9/11. I don't want to make any too controversial statements here, but gee whiz, it doesn't take a lot of research to see that something's funny there. So yeah. Kennedy assassination and Gulf of Tonkin incident, which led to, by the end of the decade, there's 500,000 Americans in Vietnam. That war is escalating like out of control, and we that through as the nodes move through the next couple sort of thing. After 9/11, you get into that next phase, and the Iraq War starts, right? So there's Kennedy and Gulf of Tonkin, and then the escalation of Vietnam. There's 9/11 and the stock market crashing with the dot-com bubble, and you end up with with the war in Iraq, where we're told to go shopping, right? The most patriotic thing, the thing we can do to help our country is to go shopping and support the economy, right? So really interesting parallels there. And so now in 2020, we have the COVID thing and the economy completely falling apart. And so what's going to happen next? Trump is still, Trump just vetoed, but basically Congress was saying, hey, if you're going to take military action against Iran, you need to ask us first, because that's how war works in the United States. Congress has the power to wage war. And Trump vetoed it. He said, no, that's insulting. I have the power to do whatever I want, basically. And so that's something to watch out for. There was fresh provocation in Venezuela. It's just like, we can see the hints of this happening, right? Where it's like this big transformative, sort of like very practical outcome that is usually a manipulation and something dark, right? Taurus and Scorpio, right? Scorpio is this underworld, secret power, hidden influences. It's backroom dealing in Scorpio. So that's coming up starting in September. So we got to watch out for that. And the hope always is that it'll expose the hidden power, right? That all the conspiracy facts, there's much conspiracy nonsense, and there are powerful people conspiring to make the world a certain way. So like we need to walk a fine line there. But so the hope is to just like having influence and happening. Just to keep going back through our timeline here, October 44 to May 46. History buffs among us? Anything important happened in that time period? Anything catastrophic? Anything that maybe looks like end World War II?
We really know our history here.
Yeah, totally. No, I'm not giving you long enough to respond. I should just keep talking. So yeah, it was in that period that we dropped the bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. It's in that period that the League of Nations was dissolved and the United Nations was created in sort of the aftermath. Basically, once the U.S. had proven themselves to be insane enough to drop a bomb on civilian populations like that, basically we became the most powerful nation in the world. There was incredible devastation all across Europe, and that basically gave rise to the US and the USSR as these major powers, and the whole world order was reorganized around those two powers. And the US got super rich with the contracts to rebuild Europe, basically, right? France had to ask us for $1 billion loan in the 40s, which at the time, that's trillions today, right? And so that world-changing quality of events, it was when, and then 26, 27, we weren't quite, it's the roaring 20s, right? So we're not quite at the Great Depression, but in 19 plunge, it was like sort of like the first tremor of the sort of unstable foundation of the economy, and the first sense that like, wait, does the Federal Reserve know what they're doing, and or are they doing what they're doing on purpose? And so that was the first sort of hint, and so there and then it really started to take hold in the in 1929, end of 29, and what there's an interesting point in that where so this is an 18-year cycle of Rahu Ketu. There's a halfway point of 9 years where the Rahu and Ketu take 18 years to go 360 degrees. It takes them 9 years to go 180 degrees and be in their inverse positions, right? And so 1929 was the stock market crash that kicked off the Great Depression. It was 1938, 9 deal was put in place and things started to really move. So it's an interesting, like, you know, numerology runs in 9-year cycles, and Rahu and Ketu, this karmic axis of the planet, also runs in 9-year cycles, 9-year half cycles, really. Yeah, so exactly, shoot the gap to September 2020. We got, like, and so once once the nodes change signs in September, we're then into the period where, you know, historically the Iraq War ramped up, where the Vietnam War ramped up, and it's less blatantly transformative, but it's like there's sort of, you know, the explosive moment within this period that then has its sort of that radiates out and has its consequences that then take form. Taurus being that fixed earth sign, it's like that's where things take form and gain solidity, and so that's where, like, and to shift things, you know, strike while the iron is hot, right? Like, things are still, you know, loose and moldable and liquid, and so now's a time where we can really be influencing. But once we get into that Taurus zone, things start to solidify and harden and actually take shape. So now's the time to be super active in that realm. Sarah, were you going to say something?
I wasn't. You're talking to me?
Delay. Okay, never mind. Yeah, it's fine. Good to take catch your breath here, because this is intense, right? These are intense patterns. These are really, really big world events that have shaped our history, and we're in the middle of it. Like, there's been this sense the whole time, like, this is history in the making. Like, society is never going to be the same after this, and hopefully that's a good thing. That's the hope, right? Hopefully we get real about what neoliberal imperialist capitalism is doing to the planet, and we can, you know, calm down a little bit.
It seems like the grade would be a good time for people to get real. Oh, can you hear me? Maybe there's a delay. Just in terms of thinking about, like, it seems like the retrograde would be a good time to, like, reflect and start getting real about what it means to be in this moment of history. And I'm afraid everyone's going to just be so excited to, like, be back to normal that we're going to miss out on some key opportunities to reflect, and it's going to be very shocking when it goes direct again. I hope that we can all get real, and I think it's going to be tricky.
Yeah, fully agree with that. And just, again, this timeline is sort of the most practical tool for this sort of, like, navigating the next year or two, because I already see it happening. You know, people are eager to get back out into and go to restaurants and you know, I have this fear that this, as extreme as it was, or is, like, it's still happening, right? As extreme as it is, it hasn't been enough. The system to its bones sufficiently to motivate the depth of change that needs to happen.
Do you think that's coming?
So, like, this eclipse,
21st situation, yeah, with the eclipse series.
Yeah. So this eclipse, where is it? Yeah, this eclipse, Mrigashira is the nakshatra, and down here, Ketu is in Mula nakshatra. We've talked about Mula before, but that word Mula means root, and this is the area of the sky where it is the galactic plane. Like when it's specifically, Mula is a 13-degree subsection of Sagittarius, this tiny little sliver of the sky that is the actual like center of the galaxy that we look towards. And it is the time and place in the sky where we are uprooting what needs to be transformed. Where it's in the metaphor of the garden that is our spiritual development, personally and collectively. Mula is the time where we are churning the soil, we are digging up the rocks, we're pulling up the weeds, basically clearing the field before we can plant a new garden, plant new seeds, grow something new. And so that's that area of the sky that this eclipse is happening in June. And so I suspect like the interesting thing about, you know, this collection of influences is that they're like looking at Jupiter, there is this perceived lull until November, but this eclipse is intense and really disruptive and uprooting and in this really potent part of the zodiac. And it's also the last eclipse in this Gemini-Sagittarius axis, which we've seen is so powerful, right? This is the axis of 9/11, JFK, and the Hiroshima bomb, and COVID this is the last eclipse. It's sort of like, you know, last week of school, senior year. Like, there's no that we need to watch out for. And
yeah.
And again, that's where, like, you know, with Mercury in that mix, like, watch for systems going down, right? Like, I sincerely worry about the power grid, and I worry about the internet, and like, that's the sort of thing that, again, I don't want to make any predictions, but I again worry that too many of us are still too comfortable. Right? This crisis has been so disruptive for so many people, but mostly it's been disruptive for the people who are already most vulnerable, whose lives were already in crisis. And it's tipped more people who were on the borderline of crisis into full-on crisis. And so there's more people moving that direction, but too many people are, and specifically the people with the power to influence things, are still too comfortable. And it's going to take a much bigger shudder and shake to really do the uprooting of the system. But man, it might not be very pleasant.
Yeah, like, do you think profound suffering is potential right now? I mean, for the vast majority of people?
I think a lot of people are already suffering profoundly. Yeah. And even, you know, and the suffering takes many forms, but talking about like what we think about when we use the word apocalypse, that bad. I hope, like, now is the time to, again, grow your gardens, know where your food comes from, know where your water comes from, memorize your friends' phone numbers or know their address, keep an extra couple jugs of water in the basement, keep an extra can of gasoline just in the trunk, just, you know, because we are entering this period, and especially, you know, even like after this last eclipse in Gemini Sagittarius and before the first one in Taurus Scorpio, it's this in-between realm, right? It's sort of like, you know, the same fears that people have, sort of like, if Trump gets reelected, that, like, cool, like, he's in his last 4 years, he's sort of got a free, like, he's not going for reelection, he's just gonna go full on with his agenda, right? That's sort of where Gemini and Sagittarius will be until September, and really until this next eclipse in December. And so there is this potential for profound social upheaval. And actually it starts right now. Mars just went into Aquarius, which is the warrior planet in the sign of the populace and the people. And so with this, Jupiter in Capricorn is this energy of like this want to expand, but then there are boundaries and limits. And so it's literally like, I'm going stir crazy, but I can't leave my apartment, right? That's a very clear metaphor or reality of Jupiter in Capricorn.
Yeah.
And then, but then Mars has just gone into, like, Mars was also in Capricorn, which was sort of giving us the dignified strength. So like, okay, this is for the common good. I'm willing to suffer for survival. I'm willing to suffer for what is correct and right. But now Mars is in Aquarius, which is a fiery planet in an air sign, right? Fire planet in an earth sign, now fire planet in an air sign. And it's got to do with the people and the populace and popular movements. And so we see these protests happening, right? People running around, storming the State House with guns because they don't want to wear a mask when they go to Costco, right? Like, and like, that's really silly. And like, the sentiment is understandable. Like, there is this sense where they're not wrong. There is this like we need to push back against the fascist tendencies of the COVID response, right? There are these attempts to manipulate this crisis to, like, what do they want to track interactions with Bluetooth in order to like track where the exposures might have happened. Like, that's the most draconian Orwellian thing possible.
But the countries that are doing the best job of flattening the curve are the ones who are like, in some ways I feel like Americans we're clinging too hard to this idea of freedom, even at the expense of each other. It's like, at some point there needs to be rules or systems, whether that's with your phone, a GPS or whatever, so that we can all thrive, right? So there's like a line there, I think,
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be violent. It's not violently imposed.
Isn't that the emphasis, that like there will continue to be systems, but there needs to be a breakdown of the current systems because they're not serving enough of like the collective?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's how I understand it.
Wow.
And yeah, Mars going in Aquarius is this like uproarious energy amongst the people, and it's it's basically like, keep us cooped up too long and we're going to get a little crazy and want to riot in the streets. And I should look at the dates of when that changes again.
As we use our voices and our relationships and our platforms, wherever we can, to be speaking about shifting the narrative from feeling cooped up to grounding in and embracing that earth element, and actually like I'm hearing that the takeaways, things we can be implementing in our own lives and sharing with our friends and our family about new ways to approach life around like the earth-based, everything from just like, hey, it's actually okay to stay at home and really like dive in and feel nourished by your own space. How can you cultivate and curate your own space to be something that nourishes you, where you don't feel like, oh, I'm cooped up. Like, it's like, get in deep, and then expanding to like plant tradition or plant medicine and these earth-based wisdom traditions and things like that. How can we be incorporating those into our spaces, even if they are small? And I know that's harder in like a small apartment in New York City. But like, so I'm thinking about the takeaways and how, like, what we can share with our friends and families and clients and whoever moving forward. And it feels like that just, there's a shift in the relationship to home, away from like feeling cooped up to, oh, I'm going in, I'm going deep.
This is my place.
This is my place.
That is the tension from transitioning to a fiery lifestyle to an earth lifestyle. And people will feel cooped up until the earth lifestyle becomes more of the norm.
And I
think there's just an inevitable tension and discomfort in the transformation.
And the thought is that if we can't, the faster we can get on board with that and shift our consumption patterns and so many things, our relationship to how we live our lives, the more suffering we will alleviate. Like seems like there will be less, we can actually prevent some of that suffering if we can all get into that space.
Yeah, fully. And yeah, the most intelligent expression of this Mars and Aquarius energy would be to fight for each other, to get out and protest for proper benefits, for proper protection for our most vulnerable people, like to instead of fighting each other, you know, screaming in each other's faces without a mask, like these horrible scenes that are coming out, to actually like come together and notice the extreme injustice and such unnecessary suffering that's happening, and get mad about that and take action based on that righteous anger, as opposed to, you know, yelling at your spouse because you're cranky because you want to look at a different person or something, you know, like or you know, blaming the police officer. You know, like there was a protest where they all like got in their cars and a whole bunch of people like blocked the road to the hospital and like created this artificial traffic jam to block the pathway to the hospital to protest that they had to stay home. Like that is
not helpful.
Such a distorted expression of the righteous anger. Like, and so this is like where it gets really tricky, because I feel those feelings. I resonate with the feeling of wanting to go out and protest, and there's so much going wrong right now, and the people who should be helping aren't, and it's all wrong. But we need to be really skillful about it, as opposed to, you know, enhancing the suffering, just looking for somebody to blame, just projecting the fury onto someone else.
Absolutely.
So yeah.
We maybe should start to think about rounding it out, just
agreed,
to honor everyone's time. But if anyone has any reflections or thoughts or questions, please unmute yourself, and or not, or yep. It says OMZ.
Thanks for being here, Naomi.
Yay.
Nice to see you ever so briefly.
And ideally these conversations will be ongoing, so come back and join us again, and we'll continue to sort of unpack different parts of what's going on, ultimately to help you better support yourselves during this time, and to help each other better support each other.
Yep. Our idea is to keep doing this once a month, and it would be every Saturday, every, I guess, fourth Saturday, at 10 a.m. in the mornings. So we hope that you'll join us again. And if you have questions, probably send them to David, and he can dive deep into those and help kind of guide the conversation for the next time. And this will also be up on the Cultivate Balance website. So it's cultivatebalance.com. And we're going to have a whole little page that has Dave's talks. So keep coming back there to check them out.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for hosting and for facilitating this conversation. It feels really, you know, to stay connected and connected to what's happening within us, with each other, and the whole cosmos. Seems like what else can we do, right? It's only from that place that we can figure out what the next best move is. And so really grateful for the opportunity to chat and share some of this information. And I hope it's helpful. And yeah, reach out to me. Happy to answer questions if you want to know, if you want to, you know, suggest something to talk about next time, or look at your own chart, or anything really. Just happy to be connected, more than anything. And so yeah, always reach out to the wonderful women of Cultivate Balance as well. They have all sorts of solutions. So let's just keep the conversation alive, and look forward to seeing y'all real soon.
David, thank you so much. We appreciate your wisdom and all that you know, and all that we know, how much time and intelligence goes into digging all of this out of the charts. It is no small feat. And we really are so grateful. And for anyone who doesn't know, David does do private readings. So go to VedaDave.com and book with him. and
Yes.
find out what's going on specific with you. So
we are
right.
so grateful for your time and your ability to like synthesize and help us put all these pieces together, because it's really, I know, helping me personally reach a lot of clarity, and it's helping me like facilitate other conversations so that people can find ways to feel more comfortable in this time. And we really are so grateful.
And I love
I'm so happy to hear that.
action items, like coming out of here with action items that we can really implement and think about. So thanks for bringing those in.
Yes.
Absolutely. Thank you guys so much. It's my pleasure and honor and my life's purpose to be here. So thanks.
Yay.
Thank you.
Thank you all for being here. Bye.